I'm Noah from American Muscle, and today we're taking a look at the SR Performance Sport Lowering Springs for the 2015 and newer Mustangs without the MagneRide. This lowering spring kit is a very affordable setup for the Mustang owner who's looking to lower their car and improve their car's handling capabilities. We are looking at a front drop of 1.2 inches and a rear drop of 1 inch for the fastback, or 1.2 inches for the convertible. These spring rates are also progressive in the front, and with that lowered center of gravity, you'll see some serious improvements in handling and body roll. These springs will work with the factory shocks as well as a nice set of aftermarket ones. I will always recommend that for the best results, go ahead and put a new set of stock shocks on at least, if not an upgraded set. Just to note, these will not work with the MagneRide equipped vehicles. To finish everything off, they are powder coated blue. That'll keep these springs protected against corrosion. I also mentioned before that the front springs are progressive. This means that the spring rate increases as the spring compresses. At the bottom of the spring's travel, you get a nice refined ride quality over potholes and rough road, but then when you push it hard in a corner and that spring compresses to the end of its travel, the spring rate increases and gives you some good handling characteristics. It makes these springs sort of a best of both worlds, very dailyable design. Coming in right around $250, these lowering springs from SR are an incredibly cheap way to get a lower ride height and improve handling on your Mustang. Now, installing these guys on your Mustang can be pretty difficult for the average DIYer. We're looking at a 3 out of 3 wrenches of difficulty and about 4 hours of work. Now, these will require a spring compressor, and expert installation is always a viable option. There is no shame in leaving it to the professionals, even if they would just mount the springs on the strut assembly for you. Then, after getting these installed, make sure to get an alignment scheduled before you drive any long distances. Now, let's head over to the shop and get these springs installed on our Mustang.
The tools you'll need for this project are half-inch drive impact gun, a 13, a 15, an 18, and a 21 millimeter deep impact socket, a 15/16 deep impact socket, a 12-inch extension, a 17 millimeter wrench, a hammer, trim removal tool, a couple of pry bars, and you'll also need access to a spring compressor. Hi everyone. Today we're installing a set of lowering springs on our Mustang, so let's get started with the uninstall first. Now once you've got your vehicle properly supported, either on a lift such as we've got, or on a set of jack stands with a jack, and you've got your tire removed, the next thing we're going to do is remove the brake caliper and the brake rotor. To do that, we're going to use our 15 millimeter socket and remove the 2 bolts in the back that hold on the caliper. All right, so we've got one 15 millimeter bolt here at the bottom and another one at the top. We'll go ahead and use our impact gun and our 15 millimeter socket and remove those. Now with those 2 bolts removed, we'll just slide our caliper out and let it rest on this support beam right here. Then we just grab our rotor, slide it off, and put it out of the way. Now we're going to go ahead and disconnect our sway bar link from our strut bracket. And to do that, we're going to use a 17 millimeter wrench. Right behind the bracket, there's a nut and our 18 millimeter socket. Now once you've got that nut off, you can just swing your sway bar link out of the way. Now we're going to go ahead and disconnect the clip for our speed sensor simply by using a trim removal tool, getting behind it and prying it out. We'll get the second one up here at the top. Again, we'll do the same thing. We'll get a trim removal tool underneath it. and just pry that out. Now we can go ahead and remove the two nuts holding our strut to our steering knuckle using our 15/16 socket. Now, once you've got your nuts removed, we're going to go ahead and flip them around and screw them back onto the studs, making sure that the flat flange piece of the nut is lined up with the end of our stud. Like so. Now we're going to use our ball peen hammer and drive that stud out enough so that it's free from the splines. All right, now that we've got it free from the splines, we'll go ahead and remove our nuts from both of the studs. And then what we can do is push in on the strut and then remove that top bolt. And we'll do the same thing for the bottom one. Now we can go ahead and remove the top nuts on the strut and go ahead and pull it out. So we'll use our 15mm socket and remove these three top nuts. Now at this point, you're going to want to reach underneath and grab that strut and hold it up while you remove that last nut. Now you can just reach out, go ahead and slide the strut down and pull it out. All right, now at this point, we're going to need our spring compressor so that we can compress this spring to remove this top nut on the strut and place our new one in. So we're going to go ahead and slip this into our spring compressor. All right, we'll get our arms locked into place. All right, now we can go ahead and use a 7/8 pass-through socket and a 10mm socket to hold the stud here. And we'll go ahead and remove this top nut. Now once you've got your nut off, you go ahead and just pull your strut down through the bottom. All right, now we're ready to install our new spring onto our strut. Now we will be reusing our top hat and upper insulator, as well as our bump stop and our dust boot and our lower insulator that's still installed on the strut. So let's go ahead and we'll compress this new spring so that we can install it onto the strut. So we'll go ahead and reinstall our bump stop and our dust boot. And we'll go ahead and slide our strut up through the top hat, making sure that the end of the coil lines up with the insulator. And go ahead and reattach our top nut. Now we'll go ahead and tighten that down using our 7/8 pass-through socket and our deep 10mm socket. With our new spring installed on our strut, we can just go ahead and install the strut pretty much the same way we uninstalled the other one. So we'll just feed this up through the top. And we'll secure it with the original hardware. And we'll tighten those down with our 15mm socket. All right, now we can go ahead and fit our steering knuckle into our strut and reinstall our 2 original bolts. We'll go ahead and reattach our nuts. And we'll tighten them down with our 15/16 socket. Now you want to make sure when you tighten these down that that bolt pulls all the way through and is flat up against the strut bracket. Now we can go ahead and reattach our sway bar end link. Put the nut back on it. And we'll tighten it down with our 18mm socket and our 17mm wrench. All right, now we'll reattach our speed lines. Just push those clips back up into the strut. Now we can go ahead and reinstall our brakes. We'll install our rotor. We'll slide our caliper over the rotor. And we'll go ahead and install the caliper mounting bolts. And we'll tighten those down with our 15mm socket. Now you can repeat that process for the other side. Make sure that you tighten everything down to factory recommended torque specifications, install the wheels, And then after you're done with the rears, make sure you take it in and get an alignment done. Now, since we're on a lift, we're going to be using a pole jack underneath our lower control arm here in the rear. If you're doing it on the ground, you can use a floor jack. You will need some support here once we get all the bolts removed. So let's start off by removing the two upper bolts for our shock mounts and then our brake bracket. All right, so we're going to use our 18mm socket to take off these two bolts at the top of our shock. And then our 13mm socket to remove our brake line bracket. All right, now we're going to remove these two 13mm bolts here and here on our rear subframe. And then we're going to remove this 21mm bolt here because we're going to end up lowering our rear subframe. So at this point, you would definitely want to make sure that you've got your jack supporting your lower control arm. Now remove this body mount bolt here. Now you will need a longer extension to get to this back one here as well. Now we can go ahead and lower our jack to release the tension on the spring. And once there's no more tension, you can go ahead and remove your jack. Now at this point, you will need an extra pair of hands and a pry bar. What we're going to do is pry down on this lower control arm here while your buddy helps pull out the spring from the top. Now, depending on how tight your spring is in there, you may need a second pry bar to help lift it up from the bottom while you're pulling down on the control arm. All right, now we're ready to install our new spring. And remember, you're going to be using the upper isolator from the old spring on top of this. Make sure you lock it in place, and then we'll go ahead and insert this. So we'll just pry down on our lower control arm, give us the extra room. And then once you've got it into place, check your lower isolator, make sure the coil spring is locked into that one as well. And then we can put our jack underneath it and raise everything back up. All right, now we'll go ahead and use our jack and raise this cradle up. And then we'll go ahead and install the bolt in the back. Now, one thing you do want to make sure of when you put these bolts back into the cradle is that you get everything started by hand first. Make sure that there's no binding and it's not cross-threaded. So once you get it started, then you can go ahead and install the front one as well. All right, so we'll go ahead and install our bracket and our body mount bolt. And again, make sure that you start it by hand. So that there's no binding. And you definitely want to put in the 13mm bolts first before you tighten down that body mount bolt. So now we'll go ahead and tighten those down. Using our 13 millimeter socket. And then we'll tighten down our body mount bolts with our 21 millimeter socket. Now we'll tighten down our rear body mount bolt. All right, once you've got your body mount bolts tightened up, you can go ahead and remove your jack, and now we'll reinstall our shock mount. And there's 2 pins right behind it, one here and one on the other side. And they're gonna go into these little grooves at the top of the shock mount. That'll line everything up so that we can go ahead and install our bolts. And we'll tighten them down with our 18 millimeter socket. Now we'll go ahead and reinstall the bolt for our brake line. And tighten that down with our 13 millimeter socket. Now that you've got this side completely installed, go ahead and torque everything down to your factory recommended torque specifications and move to the other side. And remember, once you get everything done, you are going to have to go and get an alignment done for front and rear because of the fact that we've lowered this cradle. And that wraps up our review and install of the SR Performance Sport Lowering Springs for the 15 to 23 Mustang without MagneRide. Thanks for watching, and remember, for all things Mustang, keep it right here at AmericanMuscle.com.